On a quiet, sunny morning in March of 2018, a car was found at the bottom of a cliff in Mendocino County, California. The wreckage and the body scattered nearby hinted at a terrible accident. But as the investigators dug deeper, they realized that this wasn't just a tragic crash. There was a much darker story behind it. What had driven this family to the edge? And how had no one noticed? The warning signs were there, but somehow they went unnoticed. Applause. Music. Jen's story begins on June 4, 1979, in South Dakota, USA. Jen, known as Jen, was born to a family that preferred to keep her mother's name private. Her father, Douglas, worked in the Federal Energy Administration. Jen was the eldest of 3 children, and her family lived in Huron, a small town in eastern Applause. Music. South Dakota, where Jen's childhood was filled with the beauty of nature and endless opportunities for sports, which she embraced wholeheartedly. Breaking away from typical gender expectations, she chose to play baseball with the boys instead of softball. Jen also had a deep love for animals and developed musical talents alongside her siblings, often playing the piano or violin together. Trumpet at Christmas church services. Despite the seemingly peaceful family life, Jen's parents divorced when she was 12. She and her siblings stayed with their mother while Douglas moved to a different part of town. Jen, who was closer to her father, decided at 14 to move in with him. The arrangement worked for them. It was a work in progress, but eventually, Jen's behavior became a bit of a challenge, which led her father to send her back to her mother's. Despite her rebellious phase, Jen graduated from high school in 1997, and, to the delight of her community, enrolled at Austin University, a conservative Lutheran institution. To top it off, Jen decided to be baptized into the Lutheran faith. Jen had a bit of a rough time in high school, but she graduated in 1997 and decided to enroll at Austin University, a conservative Lutheran institution. She was also baptized into the Lutheran Church, even though she wasn't raised in the faith. 2 years later, Jen transferred to Northern State University, where she met Sarah Margaret. Sarah was born on April 8, 1979 in North Dakota, and was the oldest of 4 children. The 2 women hit it off right away, and before long they were living together on campus. They were both working on their education degrees. Jen and Sarah were like 2 peas in a pod. They were both studying for their degrees, with Sarah focusing on special education. But in January 2000, Jen got into trouble. She was caught shoplifting, and when she told the police, she said she wasn't sure why she had done it, hinting at personal struggles. But she didn't let on to what those struggles were. In the end, she pleaded guilty to petty theft, but that didn't stop her from continuing her studies. But eventually she decided to drop out. Meanwhile, Sarah graduated in 2002. By this time, Jen had started to feel more distant from her family, including her father. She never told him about her relationship with Sarah, and her father said that their falling out had nothing to do with Jen's sexual orientation. After Sarah graduated, the couple moved to Minnesota and bought a 2-story house near the mall where they both worked around this time. They began to share their relationship openly with friends and family. However, this newfound openness caused some friends to distance themselves. In 2005, Sarah legally took Jen's last name, becoming Sarah Hart. Shortly after, they decided to open their home as foster parents. Their first foster child, a 15-year-old, came to live with them. She shared that she had intended to stay until she turned 18, but was asked to leave when Jen and Sarah decided to pursue adoption. In 2006, they adopted their first 3 children, Marcus, 8, Hannah, 4, and Abigail, 2, from Colorado County, Texas. 2 years later, they expanded their family with 3 more siblings from Houston, Devontae, 5, Jeremiah, 4, and Sierra, 2. All 6 children were of African American descent. Jen took on the role of RO, or stay-at-home parent. A loving home mom, she shares her life with her children on social media. She posts everyday moments and culturally enriching activities, like teaching them to play musical instruments and even cutting their hair. She also showed how the family celebrated the 30th anniversary of The Goonies, one of her favorite movies, by making matching costumes for everyone. Her online posts also highlight that Jen is a wonderful mom who loves sharing her life with her children on social media. She posts all kinds of things like the amazing things her kids can do and the fun things they do together. One time she made matching costumes for everyone for the 30th anniversary of The Goonies, which is one of her favorite movies. She also shares the kids' achievements, like Marcus's success in a geography competition and Hannah and Jeremiah's recital of the Greek alphabet. One time she shared how Jeremiah and Abby taught their youngest sister, Sierra, a kindergarten song. Jen is a very proud mother, and she often shares moments with her followers. One time, she shared a sheet full of praise that Devontae brought home. Well wishes from his classmates. Jen's social media account was filled with images of the children, many of them holding signs that read, "Love is always beautiful." In those pictures, they often appeared as a perfect family wearing matching shirts and wide smiles. However, behind closed doors, the reality was quite different from the picture painted online. In 2008, while living in Minnesota, a police officer, Jen's social media account was filled with heartwarming images of the children, many of them holding signs that read, "Love is always beautiful." In those pictures, they often appeared as a perfect family wearing matching shirts and big smiles. However, behind closed doors, the reality was quite different from the picture painted online. In 2008, while living in Minnesota, a police report surfaced in which one of the couple's daughters told officers that her mother, Sarah, had hit her with a belt. However, when the authorities questioned the mother, they both claimed that the girl had fallen down the stairs and the incident was quickly dismissed. The following year, in 2009, Sarah and Jen traveled to Connecticut to get married, as it was one of the few states where same-sex marriage was legal. At the time, same-sex marriage was legal in Connecticut, and the happy couple shared every detail of their ceremony on social media. But despite the picture-perfect facade, things weren't as ideal in the family as they appeared. On November 15, 2010, Abigail, who was 6 at the time, shared with her teacher that she had bruises on her stomach and back. She said that one of her mothers had hit her. The teacher confirmed the bruises were visible and mentioned that Abigail had also talked about other troubling incidents, including being denied food and having her head was dunked in cold water as a punishment for stealing a penny, which is really too bad. When investigators questioned the mother, Sarah admitted to hitting Abigail in a fit of rage, and Jen acknowledged that she was aware of Sarah's violent behavior. Following this confession, the authorities inspected the home and interviewed the children, all of whom confirmed that they had been physically punished and deprived of food on several occasions. Sarah pleaded guilty to domestic assault and was sentenced to 90 days in jail, which is unfortunate for everyone involved. But she didn't serve the sentence because she was granted 1 year of community service. Despite this, the children remained in the couple's custody after the legal case was resolved. Jen and Sarah withdrew their 6 children from the Minnesota public school system and began homeschooling them. In contrast to Jen's usual openness on social media, this decision was kept completely private. Jen later explained on her profiles that she believed public school was not a safe place for her children, citing discrimination due to their race and their mother's sexual orientation. She also claimed that Devontae, in particular, had suffered physical attacks, threats, and insults at school. Although she voiced her grievances about public education, Jen never mentioned the homeschooling decision on social media. Instead, she posted a photo of the 6 children sitting in a forest clearing, captioned "Science class in the woods." During this time, the family faced other challenges. According to court documents, Jen and Sarah made over 30 calls to their race and their mother's sexual orientation. She also claimed that Devontae in particular had suffered physical attacks, threats, and insults at school. Although she voiced her grievances about public education, Jen never mentioned the homeschooling decision on social media. Instead, she posted a photo of the 6 children sitting in a forest clearing, captioned "Science class in the woods." During this time, the family faced other challenges. According to court documents, Jen and Sarah made over 30 calls to the police reporting instances of discrimination and aggression due to their sexual orientation. Their neighbor, whom they had accused, later admitted to behaving inappropriately. In 2011, Jen shared moments from her life online, including her attendance at music festivals and her excitement about forming a circle of friends who even organized a party for Devontae. She frequently posted photos of him, often emphasizing how special he was in their household. However, their seemingly strong family facade began to crack when Jen shared moments from her life online, including her attendance at music festivals and her excitement about forming a circle of friends who even organized a party for Devontae. She frequently posted photos of him, often emphasizing how special he was in their household. However, their seemingly strong family facade began to crack when Sarah had to relocate to Portland, Oregon for work. Jen stayed behind with the children for 6 months until they sold their house and moved to Portland. Shortly after their arrival in Portland in April 2013, a local photographer captured an image of Devontae dancing. Jen shared the photo online, praising her son's infectious joy. Around this time, Jen befriended a woman at a charity concert who later described Jen as a kind, sensitive, and compassionate person. However, the woman also noticed that Jen was talking with Devin and Jeremiah. The other kids seemed distant, often with their heads buried in books. She described Abigail as outgoing, Marcus as shy, and Sierra as full of laughter. Jen confided in her new friend that raising the children was incredibly challenging. She mentioned that the kids had been removed from school because they were punished more harshly than others. Jen also claimed that her children were born with addiction issues due to their birth mother's drug use, which led to them overeating. She said they didn't know how to behave, and that they seemed younger than they were. Jen said this was probably because of their difficult early lives. She said that the children would never be able to live independently, work, marry, or have children of their own. She said they would never lead normal lives. But despite these concerns, no legal documents were found to support Jen's claims about the children's conditions. The family seemed loving on the outside, but there were concerns about their well-being. On July 19, 2013, the police filed a report based on concerns about the children's welfare, which was referred to Oregon's Department of Human Services. Details of the report emerged later when a neighbor from the Hart's neighborhood came forward. She accused the couple of abusing their children by withholding food, calling their treatment of. On July 19, 2013, the police started to look into concerns about the well-being of some children. They worked with Oregon's Department of Human Services. Later, a neighbor from the Hart's neighborhood shared what she knew. She said that the couple was not treating their kids well. She thought it was wrong for them to withhold food, and she thought they were being too controlling and mean to their children. Other neighbors told investigators that the children had to follow a lot of strange rules. They had to raise their hands to speak, they couldn't celebrate birthdays, and they weren't allowed to laugh at the dinner table. It was also clear that the children were scared of their adoptive mothers, even though these were really scary things to say. When the authorities interviewed the children, they all insisted that they were treated well. It was clear that the children had been coached by their mothers on what to say, but without concrete evidence, there was no legal action the authorities could take. When questioned by investigators, Jen argued that any accusations against her were rooted in prejudice. She claimed that people were intolerant of a white, lesbian couple raising 6 African American children. The authorities spoke with the children, who said they had been treated well. It seemed like their mothers had helped them prepare what to say, but there wasn't enough proof to take legal action. When asked about it, Jen said that any accusations against her were based on prejudice. She said that people weren't accepting of a white lesbian couple raising 6 African American children. Eventually, Oregon's Department of Human Services said that there wasn't enough evidence to continue. At about the same time, something happened that made one of the children well known around the world, but it had nothing to do with the accusations the family was facing. In November 2014, there was a big protest in Oregon because of the death of Michael Brown, an African American man. American children. Ultimately, Oregon's Department of Human Services decided that there wasn't enough evidence to proceed further. Around the same time, an event occurred that brought one of the children into the international spotlight, unrelated to the accusations the family faced. In November 2014, a large protest took place in Oregon following the death of Michael Brown, an African American teenager killed by police in an incident where Brown was unarmed. A grand jury decided not to indict the white police officer responsible, sparking nationwide protests. During one such protest in Oregon, Devontae was photographed with tears streaming down his face as he embraced a white police officer. The image quickly went viral, labeled as the most heartfelt hug in the world, becoming a symbol of social activism. Soon after, Jen and Sarah decided to move their families. They moved to Washington to be closer to opportunities and a better life for their kids. Jen told those around her that they no longer felt safe in Oregon, citing racial threats and strange noises outside their home. They claimed to have contacted the police several times about these incidents, but police records showed no such calls. What was documented, however, were multiple calls to the police from their new neighbors in Washington expressing concerns about the welfare of the children. In November 2017, the first of many alerts was made when 12-year-old Hannah was found wandering alone outside. Washington told her family that they didn't feel safe in Oregon anymore. They said they heard strange noises and felt threatened because of the color of their skin. They said they called the police about it a few times, but the police said they didn't get any calls about that. The police did get calls from the neighbors in Washington about the kids, though. In November 2017, there was the first of many times that the neighbors called. They said that 12-year-old Hannah was seen crawling out of a window in the middle of the night and running to a neighbor's house. When Sarah and Jen got there to get her, Hannah begged the neighbor not to let her go, saying she was being treated badly. The neighbor gave Hannah back to her mother the next day. Jen tried to make things better with the neighbors, explaining that Hannah was lying. She thought that the neighbor was upset because of the color of Hannah's skin. The poor thing, Hannah was just a baby. She was only a year old when she crawled out of a window in the middle of the night and ran to a neighbor's house. When Sarah and Jen arrived to get her, Hannah begged the neighbor not to let her go, saying she was being mistreated. Unfortunately, the neighbor handed Hannah back to her mother the next day. Jen tried to make things better with the neighbors, explaining that Hannah was lying. She said her erratic behavior was due to her biological parents, saying Hannah's birth mother was bipolar, and her father had been addicted to drugs. But this wasn't the last time that the family would be in the spotlight. In March 2018, Washington's Department of Social and Health Services launched an investigation into the family after receiving reports of potential neglect and abuse. The complaints came from another set of neighbors. These concerned neighbors had noticed that the children weren't being fed properly. The couple later spoke to the media, explaining that Devontae often came to their house asking for food, sometimes several times a day. He even confided in them that his mothers were withholding food as a form of punishment. The couple also expressed their concern about the children's appearance, noting that they appeared thin and small. One of their daughters was missing 2 front teeth, and when they asked Jen and Sarah about it, they claimed that the girl simply didn't want her teeth replaced. This explanation didn't really convince the neighbors. On top of these disturbing accounts, there was yet another failed escape attempt by one of the girls. She showed up at the couple's door late one night, having walked through thorny bushes. Daughters was missing 2 front teeth, and when they asked Jen and Sarah about it, they claimed that the girl simply didn't want her teeth replaced. This explanation didn't quite convince the neighbors. On top of these disturbing accounts, there was yet another failed escape attempt by one of the girls. She showed up at the couple's door late one night, having walked through thorny bushes trying to flee her home. She pleaded for help, saying her mothers were mistreating her and begging not to be sent back. Unfortunately, the gravity of the situation wasn't fully realized by the couple that night. When they saw Jen and Sarah searching for the girl with flashlights, they returned her to her mothers. According to reports, Washington's Child Protective Services claimed they had no previous knowledge of the situation. Jen and Sarah were worried about their daughter, and they asked for help. They said that her mothers were treating her badly. They begged not to be sent back. That night, the couple didn't understand how serious the situation was. They saw Jen and Sarah looking for the girl with flashlights. They brought her back to her mother's house. Washington's Child Protective Services said that they didn't have any records of concerns about the family in Washington or in any other state. There were earlier allegations in the U.S., but it seemed that the system failed the children. The authorities had to deal with some paperwork first, and they arrived at the Hart family's home later. By that time it was too late. Jen and Sarah had already left, taking the children with them. What follows is a reconstruction of the events that happened. Based on what the authorities found out in the days before the tragedy, here's what happened. Social services tried to contact Jen and Sarah 3 times, but they couldn't get in touch with them. We later learned that on March 24, 2018, Jen, Sarah, and their 6 children left Oregon and started driving south. They reached North Carolina the next morning on March 25, 2018. Jen was seen. Jen and Sarah were trying to get away from their past, and on March 24, 2018, They left Oregon and started driving south. They stopped in North Carolina the next morning. Jen and Sarah went to a grocery store to buy food, and the family stayed in the area until later that night, when they continued their journey. Sadly, on March 26, 2018, the family's SUV was found at the bottom of a cliff in Mendocino County, California. According to investigators, Jen was driving. She had stopped the vehicle at a pullout on the highway before accelerating off the cliff. Jen and Sarah, both 39, were found dead inside the vehicle, while 3 of their children, Abigail, Jeremiah, and Marcus, were found lifeless outside the SUV. 2 weeks later, Sierra's body was discovered on a nearby beach, and in May, part of a foot inside a shoe was found on another beach. DNA testing later confirmed it belonged to Hannah. Devon's body was never recovered, but authorities concluded that he too had perished, and a judge issued his death certificate on April 3, 2019, following this horrific tragedy. A thorough investigation was conducted after the incident, though unfortunately it came too late. This led to public outrage and accusations of negligence. During the road trip, investigators discovered that while Jen was driving, Sarah, seated in the passenger seat, had searched the internet for several concerning things. These included how to induce drowsiness using over-the-counter medications, how long it takes to die from hypothermia in a car, and how to find a shelter for their dogs. This was particularly upsetting. It's heartbreaking to think that the couple left their 2 dogs at home, showing compassion for them but not for their children. After the tragic deaths of their 6 children, authorities searched the family's last home. It appeared clean, orderly, and newly renovated. While Jen and Sarah's personal spaces were fully furnished and decorated, the children's room was bare. Investigators noted that the family's luggage was still in the house and that none of them had even packed a toothbrush. It's heartbreaking to think that Jen and Sarah left their 2 dogs at home, showing compassion for them but not for their children. After the tragic murders of their 6 children, authorities searched the family's last residence. The home appeared clean, orderly, and newly renovated. While Jen and Sarah's personal spaces were fully furnished and decorated, the children's room was bare. Investigators noted that the family's luggage was still in the house, and none of them had even packed a toothbrush. Before leaving, evidence pointed to a premeditated act. One of the officers involved in the case concluded that Jen and Sarah, feeling cornered by the accusations against them, made the conscious decision to end their lives and tragically take their children with them. A psychological evaluation suggested that the couple believed that if they couldn't keep the children, no one else should. Toxicology reports revealed that Jen, who had been driving, had consumed the equivalent of before leaving. Evidence pointed to a premeditated act. One of the officers involved in the case thought that Jen and Sarah felt cornered by the accusations against them. They felt so cornered that they made a conscious decision to end their lives and tragically take their children with them. A psychological evaluation suggested that the couple believed that if they couldn't keep the children, no one else should. Toxicology reports revealed that Jen, who had been driving, had consumed the equivalent of 5 beers. This is enough to impair one's abilities. Witnesses later stated that Jen rarely drank. This fueled speculation that she may have consumed alcohol to muster the courage to carry out the grim plan. Additionally, traces of a sedative were found in the system of Sarah and 2 of the children. This case shocked society, especially those who had followed the family's seemingly happy life on social media for nearly a decade. Jen had shared photos of the children posing next to displays of food. Jen and Sarah were known for sharing images of their children enjoying vegetarian burgers, fresh vegetables, berries, and chocolate cream pies. This was very different from what was claimed about them. The difference between the way they presented themselves on social media and the reality behind closed doors was a very sad part of the case. Also, Jen and Sarah kept saying that their children were safe at their home, but the children said something different, and their final fate was very different from what they had hoped. Vegetarian burgers, fresh vegetables, berries, and chocolate cream pies. These images are a far cry from the allegations that Jen and Sarah routinely deprived the children of food. The heart-wrenching disconnect between their social media persona and the reality behind closed doors was a haunting element of the case. Moreover, Jen and Sarah's repeated claims that their children were in their home to be safe clashed harshly with the testimony of the children themselves and their ultimate fate. While Jen and Sarah can no longer be questioned or held accountable for what happened on that California cliff, The investigation has been officially closed. Their deaths were ruled as suicides, and the deaths of their 6 children were classified as homicides. Beyond the horrifying actions of Jen and Sarah, this case has drawn intense criticism of the system that was meant to protect the children. Time and time again, the system failed them. Authorities in 5 states have been involved in the children's care. We're thinking of Sarah and her family during this difficult time. The investigation into her family's tragic passing has come to an end. The tragic deaths of Sarah, her parents, and their 6 children have been ruled as suicides and homicides, respectively. It's heartbreaking to think about the lives of these children that were lost. The system that was in place to protect them fell short. The authorities in 5 states were involved in their adoptions and the abuse allegations, but unfortunately, no one could prevent this from happening. This has led to important conversations in the media and among the public about the need for better federal oversight of child abuse cases.